In 2024, many Americans are concerned about where they are in the economy and where things are heading in the United States. Many Americans are concerned that the vision and the life and the positivity that their grandparents, their parents had, that some of that is going away economically. And sticking to the economics, what is the driver of this concern? Well, to break it down to very simplistic terms, the issue is that the United States right now in 2024 is neither a country that has an extremely strong currency so that it can purchase things cheaply, and it is not a country that has a strong manufacturing base so that it can export things dramatically and then in turn be an industrial base with high employment for that manufacturing sector. So, your grandparents were part of the industrial strength United States. That's a generation that, up until just after World War II, was part of a country that made a lot of things and exported them all over the world. But to rebuild the economies of the post-World War II era, the United States embarked on allowing these other countries to build up their economies by allowing high tariffs on our goods and no tariffs on their goods. Also, the United States went through a dramatic transition where so many Americans who were once part of this industrial base began post-World War II moving out into newly made suburbs, getting grants and financial assistance to go to college, and therefore, when they came out of schools, were going into new sectors of the American middle-class workforce instead of staying in fields that traditionally have been held by more hands-on labor. So when that American dream shifted, or when that American workforce shifted, what happened? Well, not everybody, of course, ended up going to school and becoming a doctor or a lawyer. And that's a generalization, of course. But one of the issues that has plagued the United States for the current generation is that the grandparents were part of the industrial America and then went through a transition. Your parents were part of a service-based rich dollar America, and that's gone through a transition because the dollar is no longer very rich. In fact, it's lost a lot of its value through the process of inflation. Inflation being the expansion of the money supply, and that happening because the United States decided to come off the gold standard, take a tremendous amount of debt, run deficits, and suddenly the United States dollar isn't able to purchase things at the same rate that it did 45, 40 to 50, 60, 70 years ago. Case in point, look at the cost of something like a McDonald's hamburger. McDonald's hamburgers are made more efficiently in 2024 than they were in 1990. But that same burger is perhaps smaller than it was in 1990 and costs triple the cost. So young Americans who want to buy a house, buy a car, go on multiple vacations every year, and might even earn more in terms of dollar amount than their grandparents, find themselves with less purchasing power than their grandparents. Now, not everything is bleak. There's always ways to improve, but the United States has to make a choice. Is it going to continue down a path of being a service-based economy, attempting to have a high-valued currency? If it is going to do that, it has to cut its debt. Stop running deficits so that it doesn't create more inflation. On the other side of things, if the United States is going to transition into an industrial power and begin selling things into the European market and perhaps even competing to sell goods to an emerging African market, Middle Eastern market, Asian markets, then it must make a transition internally in terms of creating that domestic production. One other side note, and this will be discussed further in another video. One of the issues that the American youth are going through is that many of its predominant businesses and predominant companies benefit themselves, and they benefit, for the most part, many other markets besides just the United States. For example, in the United States, you have a wonderful company like Apple that makes some of the greatest pieces of technology in our generation, but a lot of these things are manufactured overseas and they're sold all over the world, including the United States, whereas a Chinese company like, for example, Xiaomi or Huawei or BYD, these companies make their goods domestically hire their own people to make those goods, and then they are then sold all around the world. Of course, in some cases not being allowed to sell into the American market, but that's American protectionism, and that's a whole different conversation about the differences in IP laws, etc. So to summarize, the American youth have a right to be concerned about where they stand versus their parents and grandparents, simply because the American youth are living in an economy that has not been able to make a choice. It is either going to be an industrial domestic power, or it's going to be a foreign service-based economy with a high-valued currency. But a choice must be made, because the path that it's going down now is being none, and being none means going out of business.